Hi everyone. I wanted to go through some of the information that's in the Suspense East-West spreadsheet that I have up online, as I can use as many people as possible to help me find as many of these recordings as there may be out there. This has been a very interesting project in Suspense. It started in 2004 and continues to this day at various places. One of the things I'm known for is the Suspense Collector's Companion book, which I basically put together just to keep all of my notes organized. Um, and as I've been continuing to study the series and its history, one thing that I've found from going through countless collections of suspense, looking for the best sound, I've been finding some very curious recordings where it might be the same script, but there's different recordings of them. Now, I had always kind of dismissed the East and West thing as not really being all that important. But as I've gotten more recordings and gotten deeper into history, my first impression was definitely wrong. So what I've done is I've prepared this spreadsheet that goes through the process, and I'm really mainly looking at the third period of East-West broadcasts, which are from September 14th, 1944 to November 20th, 1947. So this is when Suspense was on for one night for Roma Wines. I'll explain another period of uh, of sponsorship that Roma had two broadcasts later on. Um, but first, let's look at this spreadsheet. I've got some information here on the first page, and we're going to click East-West log. Okay, I have some different headings here that are very important. Uh, when you're looking for recordings, some are east, some are west. Sometimes we can find both, and it's marvelous when we can find both. So I laid out my suspense log, and I've got information about how many recordings we have and something about the nature of them. Through my research, I found that there is a very short 2-week period in August 1943 where Suspense had East and West broadcasts on one night. That was a special Saturday night broadcast. It was only 2 weeks at that time. There were no East-West broadcasts of Suspense prior to that. It was not common anyway in the radio to have sustained programs have East and West Coast. It was really only sponsored programs that had that privilege. So anyway, CBS had some time on Saturday night. They wanted to promote Suspense. It's the summertime. Not as many people are listening. And one way of getting people to listen is to, of course, run Sorry, Wrong Number. So they did that. And we have two recordings of Sorry, Wrong Number. And when I get to the next page, I'll describe how we know that they are different. Uh, but let's just look at this page, and I'll go through some of the jargon and some of the things I've put in here to help us figure out where things are. In the first column, you've noticed that there are some cells in black with white type, some just a regular spreadsheet cell, and others that are highlighted in light gray. So where we have two recordings of East and West, and they've been identified, then we have that black cell. If we have one recording, and this is You'll Never See Me Again, this is line 5 of the spreadsheet. We've got one recording, and it's in the unidentified column. We don't know what it is. We don't know whether it's East or West, but we do have a recording. The next line, September 21, Bluebeard of Balak, is two recordings. We know that they are different. The next sheet explains how they're different, but we don't know which belongs to which geography. So that's the basic outline of how this spreadsheet is written up. Now, East and West only applied to network programs, not AFRS. And there are some programs in this period that we don't have any network recordings. We only have AFRS recordings. and those are marked. And there's also a couple of episodes that are just plain missing. We don't have any recordings of them at all. In fact, I'll scroll down till we come to Fury and Sound. And that's a very important recording. That's a separate chapter in my book. It's a roast of Bill Spear, is what it turns out to be. It's missing. And it was sold on eBay as a AFRS disc. Um, and I also have a copy of the script that the collector gave me to look at. And it's just fascinating, a piece of suspense history. Um, so if you scroll down, you'll see some notes. We have some air checks, and they're from West Coast stations. So of course, those are West Coast broadcasts. So we know that they automatically qualify. So there's a lot of interesting information here. Now, if we go to the next page where we have the specific details, here we have those 2 weeks again in August of 1943. Luckily, we have an air check from a Vancouver station. This came courtesy of Dave Lennox, who is a Toronto area collector, and at one time was a radio personality and an entertainment personality with his family in Canada. And he's been a collector for decades. And he had this recording. It was done in a Vancouver station, and it wasn't even done for broadcast. It was done because there was an actor who wanted to study Agnes Moorehead's performance. So it survived. It was recorded from the network feed from the West Coast, and we know it's from that particular station. And we also have another recording, a network recording, and it doesn't match the timing of the West Coast recording. So therefore, we know we have two different recordings. The second one is a program called King's Birthday, and this one we actually had to listen very carefully at the end because it says when Suspense is going to come back on the air, and it mentions Eastern wartime and Pacific wartime for people to be listening. And then there's a West Coast version that mentions only Pacific wartime. So we know we have 4 recordings for 2 broadcasts there. Now, I mentioned Bluebeard from September 21, 1944. We know we have 2 recordings because one says next Thursday, ladies and gentlemen, and the other one says next Thursday, same time, as they're teasing for the upcoming show. So we know they're different, but we don't know which is which. Now, what we've tried to do here is put enough information about the recordings that we've been able to locate so far so that you can identify whether or not you have a recording that hasn't been in this collection, or I haven't had a chance to evaluate yet. At the end of every program, most of them say produced by William Spear for the Roma Wine Company of Fresno, California. And then the theme will play for a certain period of time, and then it will say CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. And that will be the end of the program. Now, that network ID was usually done a specific amount of time prior to the top or the bottom of the hour. So depending on how the rest of the show flowed, they would have either more theme music or no theme music at all. So it's the distinctive part of figuring out which recording is which. So on You'll Never See Me Again, there's a 4-second gap there. If you go down to Dateline Lisbon, you'll see that one, they immediately say Aroma Wine Company of Fresno, California. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System, without stopping. And then we have another copy that says 17 seconds. There's a 17-second music delay before they give the network ID. So that's what's the information is there. Here we have an interesting one from the Brighton Strangler. It's Christmas time, and they're giving some background about all the people who worked on Suspense over the prior year. And one of the people they forget to mention is Milt Stark, who was an assistant to William Spear. And they forget that in the East, but they add it to the West. Now, logically, there's no reason for them to take somebody's name out. So it must have been the East Coast where they forgot him and then added it in for the West. That's the only logic that I can think of. When you get down to something like pearls are a nuisance, well, we have file names on the recordings. So the geography that was targeted was usually on the disc labels. It would say Eastern and Western. And if somebody did a really good job of transcribing the discs into a digital file or onto a reel of tape, they would keep a good record of that, and then that designation would stay within the file name when it was digitized, and we have the benefit of that work today. Now we know that there's differences between the two programs because one goes directly to the identification after saying Roma Wine Company, and the other one has a 4-second delay. So most of the rest of the program could be exactly alike, but this seems to be an area where there's some differences. If we go up to Love's Lovely Counterfeit, which is this one from March 8th, there's two different show openings. One says, and now the Roma Wine Company, Fresno, California. Another one says something different. So we know that there are two different broadcasts. Why they changed, we have absolutely no idea. This particular one, Burning Court, which is a program that was sold on eBay and was released to collectors via Radio Spirits about 10 years ago. Um, there's a picture of the disc label that was part of the eBay ad when I saved that. Now, how will we know if something else comes up? Well, this particular one is 25 seconds to the ID. So that's the characteristic of that one. So as you go through the list, you'll see that there are many different ways to identify the geography of the program. One of the most interesting one is when FBI and Peace and War followed Suspense on the East Coast. So it was optional, but sometimes the script would say, "Stay tuned for the exciting adventures of the FBI in Peace and War." And that would only be part of the East Coast broadcast because on the West Coast, FBI and Peace and War was often before Suspense went on the air. They had a different delay in the broadcasts. It was common for the East and West Coast versions of Suspense not to be 3 hours apart, but to be 4 hours apart. So it was at a better time where they could get the biggest audience they thought possible on the West Coast. So 3 hours is like your first guess, and then 3.5, 4 hours. It varied over the time of the history. So if you have two recordings and one has FBI and Peace and War, and then the other one doesn't mention it, then we know the other one is a West Coast broadcast. In putting this together, um, I tried to look for things that also may help, like at the end of A Strange Death of Gordon Fitzroy, Ken Niles, the announcer, sounds like he's holding back a laugh at the end. And here's one plain case of murder where you can hear him sniff like he's catching his breath after it. Um, at a mid-show commercial on Three Blind Mice, right after that, they changed the dialogue in the courtroom right after the commercial. I've known about that one for years, but I still haven't been able to identify which is East or West Coast. And there are many other things that you can see here as you scroll through the document. At the time that I'm recording this, these are the summary totals: 166 broadcasts. We've got 9 AFRS, 5 missing broadcasts, 66 where we have both East and West, and 86 where we only have one. So of course we're looking for the missing broadcasts, but we want to supplement as much as possible the one. Now on the website, I've identified reasons why many of these programs may have fallen out of circulation, and hopefully we can find some of them. I've been going through many recordings over these last few days, and it's been very difficult sometimes to tell between programs. But as I started to realize how important the time to the network ID was, that became a primary way of doing it. And of course, you can find other aspects of the programs, dialogue, announcements, and the like. I've documented the ones I've found, but I know that there are more. and sometimes you just bump into these casually. Now to the last page of the spreadsheet. Roma Wines sponsored Suspense, and I have a feeling that the contract happened very, very quickly, and the CBS Pacific network wasn't particularly ready for it. They had already committed a lot of time. They wanted Thursday night. It was always a big night for radio. It became a big night for television. In a lot of ways, it still is, but they couldn't clear the amount of time. So they settled on a less than optimal solution, which is to have a Thursday night for the East Coast, and then the West Coast would get a Monday performance, and they would have to get the same guests and the same supporting players as much as possible, and production people as much as possible. Um, if you look at the suspense log we've been putting together, one of the weeks Joe Kearns is on vacation, so somebody else does the whole Man in Black thing. John McIntyre does it. So you have a recording that has McIntyre and a recording that has Kearns. But these are fairly straightforward to figure out. Um, they seem to be hard to find, but at the end of a program, Joe Kearns will say, "Join us next Thursday for," and then on the West Coast one, he said, "Join us next Monday for," and for a lot of them, we have both recordings. We even have a trifecta. Sometimes we have an AFRS recording too, and AFRS seems to have been using the Thursday recording for their um, broadcasts creation of discs that they would send out to the different AFRS stations. So that's it. This has been a fascinating project, and I have gotten incredible amounts of help from people all over the hobby, all around the world, and I really appreciate uh, the assistance that everyone has given me so very generously. If you want to contact me, if you think you have a program, there's a special email address, suspenseotr@gmail.com, suspenseotr@gmail.com. And I am always on the Old Time Radio Researchers Facebook page, and I can also be found at the Cobalt Club Forum. Thank you so very much for your interest and for your help.